Okay, hitting critical mass. We are at the top of the hour. So I know that we have some really exciting content that we're going to hear from our partners at the Missouri Cares Project. So again, welcome everyone. My name is Terry Bearden. I'm the project director for organizational capacity building here at the National Community Action Partnership. You are in the NCAP Data Hub overview of improved map room design and enhanced functionality. So whoop, whoop to all the data folks who are joining us. And let's go ahead and ground ourselves as we like to do in the promise of community action. Community action changes people's lives, embodies the spirit of hope, improves communities, and makes America a better place to live. We care about the entire community, and we are dedicated to helping people help themselves and each other. And so with no further ado, I am going to hand things over to Jamie Kleinsorge with Missouri Cares, and she's going to wow us with some information about the new and improved Data Hub.
Great. Thank you so much, Terry. It's good to be here with you all this morning. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. And hopefully you guys can see that all okay. So yeah, as Terry said, my name is Jamie Kleinsorge. I'm with the Center for Applied Research and Engagement Systems. We're part of the University of Missouri, and we've been hosting the National Community Action Partnership Hub for more than 10 years now. And so you can imagine that it looked very different 10 years ago, and we continue to make improvements. And that's really what we're going to be talking about today, are some improvements that we have made to our map room. So hopefully you guys are familiar with the community needs assessment that's available within the Data Hub, but we also have a map room, which we isn't quite as straightforward sometimes as the needs assessment, but it can be really useful when you're looking to explore issues and opportunities within your community. If you're looking to gather data or visualizations for either a presentation or maybe a grant application. And so I'm going to show you some of the enhancements and improvements that we've made within the map room. And then if you do have any questions, we'll have time at the end. I'm happy to walk through anything that you might have questions about. Feel free to type any questions that you have in the chat. I do have a member of my team, Jordan, with me here today, and she'll probably be able to help you answer some of those questions as we go along, if you do have any. So, all right, well, let's get started. So to find the new map room, under this Map My Community option, you'll see that there's Map Room, which is going to be the old map room, and then we have the new map room. So just to let you guys know that we'll be transitioning over to the new map room fully towards the end of June, beginning of July. And so just get ready for that switch. And this is what the new map room looks like. And so it's a little bit different layout than the old map room. I've been joking that the biggest thing I've had to get used to is that our legend and menu options used to be on the right-hand side, and now they're on the left-hand side. So just a little bit of a switch there. But we have a lot of really great features and functions within the map room. So to get started, one thing that you'll notice is that the National Community Action Partnership agency boundaries are pre-populated onto the map. And so this is just a really nice feature. So you're able to see your agency region, have a nice outline when you do make maps, but you can turn it on and off, and I'll show you how to do that. So to get started, the first thing that we typically do when we enter the map room is we search for data. So to give you a little bit of history on our map room and data, we currently host over 30,000 data layers within our map room. Those data come from over 120 different national secondary sources. So things like the US Census, the EPA, the CDC, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, all of those sort of big national agencies that produce data. We have data from them, and then we do also provide data from institutions like Brookings and the Urban Institute and other places that create data based on surveys or research that they've done. So to get started in searching, this is how the map room will look when you first open it. The first thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to click this Add Data button over here on the left-hand side. So when I do that, a couple of things happen. First and foremost, you'll see that we have kind of a new section here, two new sections. First is recently added data, and then we have the most used data. So recently added data are things that we have either recently incorporated into the map room, so new data that we didn't have before, or it includes things that we've updated. So we try to update our data as frequently as it is updated by the source. So you'll see some of those rolling updates for things. So for example, we've recently updated a lot of broadband data from the FCC. We've also updated some educational attainment related data that you can see here as well. So that is a new section that recently added data, and hopefully it's helpful to you to be able to see, again, what we have been working on and what's now available to you. There's also this other section called the most used data. And I think this is really cool because it gives you an opportunity to see what other folks are using within the data hub, right? So people from all over the country working at community action agencies, what kind of maps are they making, right? And so that most used data is going to give you an idea of what kinds of data folks are using on their maps. So we can see things like the agency boundaries are going to show up, but things like food deserts, Head Start facilities, students eligible for free and reduced price lunch. So those are going to be right there at your fingertips for the most used data. Now, the couple other ways to search for data. They mimic what we used to have in our old map room. They're just laid out slightly different. So first and foremost, we have this Browse by Topic button up here at the top. And if I click that Browse by Topic button, what's going to happen is a taxonomy is going to appear. So you'll see that we have some major categories here: civic, social, economic, education. And if I click any of these carets, so these little arrows next to that name, what'll happen is then subcategories will also populate. So you can see here we have things like built environment, civic engagement, crime. And as I click into these subcategories, I get even more information or even more categories. So I can look at things like incarceration rates, law enforcement, property crime, violent crime. And so as I click into some of the subcategories, now I've gotten down to the individual data layers that I can add to my map. So this is a great way to explore some of the data that we have by topic, right? So if you're interested in or looking for data around a specific topic, this Browse by Topic option is really nice. I can click any of these data layers and you'll see that I get this nice little view legend and it'll populate on my map, and I'm able to continue on that way. Now, that's one way to search, is that Browse by Topic, but we also have a Browse by Source option as well. And so if you are looking for data from a specific data source, this is a good way to start. It works much just like that Browse by Topic, where you'll see that there's sort of those top level agencies, and we can click into any of these carets, and it's going to open up down to those individual data layers that are available from that source. I really like looking at this list because it teaches me something new every time. There's always new data sources being added. And so it's a great way to kind of get familiar with what is available, what kind of data comes from what kinds of sources. And so you'll see that as I scroll down here, some of those big names that I mentioned, like the CDC and the census, we also have data from things like CMS and the EPA. We've got FCC data around broadband. We've got some HUD data around housing. There's some national data. There's some data actually from the Community Action Partnership, which is going to be mostly those boundaries. So I would encourage you to take a look at this list if you're not familiar, or you just want to get more familiar with data sources that we have here. So the last way to search for data is probably the way that is most commonly used, which is that search by keyword up here. So the key word here is keyword. So we are asking you to use 1 or 2 words to describe what it is that you're looking for. Unfortunately, we're not quite there to where you can ask a full question yet, but we are talking about how to get there. But you're going to be wanting to ask or look for keywords like housing, education, poverty, all of those are kind of singular keywords that you can use in the search. You can also use compound words like life expectancy or health insurance or primary care or mental health. Those are all fine too. What we're trying to avoid though is like full sentences, right? So today, my example for this demonstration, I want to look at seniors who are living alone. So we're headed into the summer season, and we know that because of the way that the climate is changing, right, we're experiencing a lot of high heat days across the United States. And so we know that one of our more vulnerable populations when it comes to high heat days is seniors over the age of 65. And luckily, we have a data set around seniors living alone. So I can type in, for example, seniors living alone, couple of keywords, right? And I'm going to be able to get some results here. So I can see that I get about 5 results. These are all the same data set coming from the American Community Survey, but we can see that they're from multiple years. So I want to click this first one right here. And so to add any layer to the map, you're going to want to click the checkbox next to the layer name. So you'll get that whether you are typing the keyword, you are looking for results by topic or by source, right? You'll get down to those individual checkboxes. So now that I've clicked that checkbox, there's a couple of things to note here. As we're searching, you'll notice that all of the data layers that we search have this little I button next to them. And this button gives us more information if we click it. And I want to point this out because if you're not familiar with a lot of data sets, sometimes you're just like asking, is this going to get me what I'm actually looking for? And so the I button will give you a little bit more information about the data layer itself. So you'll see here on the right-hand side, I now have a description that tells me a little bit more about what this data layer is going to show. It also gives me a release date, so I can tell how recently it was released by the source, how often it's released, what kind of data types that we have. So in this instance, we have percent and total, if it's available at more than 1 geographic unit. So a lot of times we are working at the county level, but we want to see data at the census tract or zip code level, right? Because we're also working in communities. You can also see the data source, and there's a link back to the original source. So if you wanted to get back to the root of the data or get to those raw files, you could do that easily. And then we also have a data source description. So just wanted to point out that little I button is available to you. Anytime you've got any of these menus open, there should be these, again, little carrots where you can pop them in and out so they don't take up your full screen. So now that I've clicked the checkbox next to households with seniors living alone for this most recent ACS year, you'll notice that I have this little view legend button next to it. So it's telling me that I now have data on my map and I can view the legend. I can also click the legend button anytime over here in the left-hand menu as well. Both of those things will take me to the same place. And so now the legend has opened, right? We're able to see sort of what is going on this map. What do those darker green areas mean in comparison to the lighter green areas? So the darker green areas is where we have more seniors over the age of 65 living alone. The lighter green areas is where we have fewer. Right now, we're looking at this at a county level, right? So a couple of things to notice as we're exploring our data and our legend. First off is that color ramp, just like I was saying. That's the first thing that you're probably going to want to pay attention to because it's going to give you information about what you're seeing on the map. The next couple of things are options that you have. And so first and foremost, if we do have data available at multiple geographies, that is going to be the first drop down that you've got. So for example, this data layer is also available at a county, place, tract, and zip code level. Anytime you see that ZCTA, that's going to stand for zip code tabulation area, which is just a fancy way of saying zip codes, right? So in this instance, I want to look at tract level data. So when I change it to track, you'll see what happens is that my map reloads at a track level, right? So it's slightly different view because we're looking at smaller geographies now. The other options that I have here are data type. So these of data are available by percent. So how many seniors living alone over the number, right, of total seniors, that gives us the percentage. But then we can also look at total numbers as well. So if I change it from percent to total, you'll notice that my map changes as well. Now, instead of looking at greens, I'm looking at these kind of lavender colors, and I see that the darker lavender means there's more than 200. And the lighter lavender means under 70 or 71. I'm going to switch this back to percent just so we can continue on. And then the other thing that's very exciting and is a new change for this map room is the time period dropdown. So one of the things that was not available previously in our old map room, you'd have to go back and search for data, search for the same data layer and add it for previous years. You could still do that, but now we've added this time period dropdown. So you're able to go back in time if you want to, right? So we're looking at the most recent data. I could go back and look at 2016 to 2020. I could go back and look at 24 to 2018. And so all of those things are available. Now it's telling me it wants me to zoom in to view this data. Give me 1 second. And it's thinking about loading. So there we go. So I'm going to go back to my most recent data layer, or most recent year for this layer. So we've talked about changing geographies. We've talked about changing data types. And now we've talked about changing time periods. So those are all options that you may or may not have for each data layer that you add. So that's just kind of something to note, is that we try to produce or provide data at multiple geographies, but we can only do it when they're available. So some are only available at the county level or at the state level, but many of the data that we have are available at multiple geographies. So just something to note there. All right, so from here, the next thing that I want to show you is, I kind of already zoomed in because it asked me to, but we can change our location at any time. So down here on the bottom right, you'll see that there's a couple of options. So I'm going to go back to my full United States just for the demonstration here, and I can do that by clicking that home button, right? So if we wanted to see this data all across the US, we could click that home button and it's going to give us that full US view. But if I wanted to go to a specific location, I can do a couple of things. One change that we have made is the ability to get more specific in the extent that you want to see. So if you do have a mouse, like a scroll mouse, you can use your scroll mouse to scroll in little by little. And this is very exciting because in our old map room, it was sort of either you zoomed in a lot or you're zoomed out a lot. So this gives us a little bit more fine tuning there. You can still use the plus and minus buttons like we had in the old map room, and they're over here on the right-hand side, that bottom right-hand corner. So I could zoom in here and get a little bit closer. I could zoom out and it'll zoom out for me. The other thing that we can do is we can use this search bar, so the find address or place here. So I actually want to look at Oklahoma City today. And so as I type that in, it's going to try to guess where I want to go. And I can hit enter and zoom in to Oklahoma City. So now we're still looking at households with seniors age 65 and over living alone. We're looking at that by track level. And so we can see a lot of granularity around Oklahoma. So now a couple of other things that we can do within the map room. First and foremost, I want to encourage everyone to click the map. It's not always the first thing that you do, but you can get so much more information when you do click the map. So for example, if I were to click on any census tract here, right now it's going to give me agency boundaries, but I can switch down to my households with seniors living alone, and I'm going to get some more information. So it's going to tell me the state, the county, the census tract. It's going to give me a geo ID, which may or may not be meaningful to you. And then I'm going to get down into the data itself. And I think this is really important because if you look back over here at our color ramp for our legend, right, that darkest green is showing us areas where over 13% of the population includes seniors living alone, right? But I always want to ask the question, how far over 13%, right? So when we click a census tract, we can see here, for example, this census tract is around 23.9, 24% of seniors in that area are living alone. So almost a quarter, right? That's a big difference between 13, right? So it's really important to click the map to get that additional information and not just rely on the legend to kind of tell you the severity or the opportunity that lies within a specific area. We'll also produce margins of error. You can see the total number of seniors living alone, the total number of households, and that all of that information is included in that pop-up. So encourage you to definitely click the pop-up and learn more about different areas that you're interested in. The other thing that we can do, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to actually turn off my NCAP boundaries for now, is we can add more data. So we could do this in the old map room, but it works just a little bit differently here in the new map room. So over here again on the left-hand side, I can click my Add Data button, just like I did when I first started. And you'll see that it saves that search from the first time around. And so that way, if you did want to come back and add other layers related to seniors that populate, you can do that very easily. If you don't want to and you're looking to add something different, you can simply click this X up here in that keyword search, and it's kind of going to give you a fresh slate there. So the next thing that I want to look at, like I had mentioned, is the high heat days, right? So I know that we have data related to the heat index. So I'm going to use those two words, right, to search for data here. So heat index, and I get about 29 different results when I search that. So we have this heat wave risk by county that's given to us by FEMA. And then we also have these heat index days, so average days above a certain temperature. And that's what I'm looking for. It's from the CDC. It's as recent as 2019 to 2021. So I'm going to go ahead again, and I'm going to click the checkbox next to the layer name, and you'll see that my map changes and it's added to the map. So now I can go back again and view my legend by clicking that View Legend button. So anytime you add a new data layer, it's going to add it on top of any other data that you've already got on the map. So you'll see here now we're looking at county level heat index days, average days above 100 degrees. This is a good example where we only have one option to make any changes here. We can change our geography, and we only have two geographies to select from, either county or tract level. So anytime that you are making a map, it is in your best interest to find data all at the same geography. That's not always possible, but it is going to tell a better story. It's going to give you better information if you're looking at everything either at a county level or a tract level or a zip code level. So keeping that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn on my geography for tract level. So we're looking at both the households with seniors and the heat index at the same geography. Now, this comes into learning how to understand two layers on the map at one time, right? So our high heat index days are sort of right over our households with seniors living alone. We can sort of see the darkest red areas are probably those areas where those two things overlap, but we can't be sure, right? So there's a couple of ways that you can go about looking at two layers at one time. The first is to use labels. So you'll notice up here that we can turn our map layers on and off by clicking the map button. And then at any time we can turn labels on the map by clicking that label button, right? So now we're looking at, we can see like how many days, right? The numbers on the map are how many days over 100 degrees in these given census tracts. It's still colored though as two layers on top of one another. So we have this opacity or transparency slider that we can use right now. And so I'm going to turn it all the way down so I can't see any of that red anymore. And I'm just looking at my households with seniors living alone. But now I can see two things at once, right? And I can zoom in a little bit more, so it's a little less crazy here. But we're looking at sort of this east side, right? This east side of Oklahoma City where we can see it's dark green. That means that we've got lots of seniors living alone. And now we can see how many days on average it's over 100 degrees. And so we can see over here, for example, it's around 46, 47. And down here, it's a little less, 43, right? So as we're thinking about programming and funding and those types of things, we're going to want to put our money and our time and our effort into those areas that probably have the greatest need, right? So the ones that have the most seniors living alone and have the most heat index days, high heat index days, right? So that's one way to go about looking at those two layers together, right? Is by using labels and using our transparency slider, right? To kind of turn those colors off, but to turn the labels on. The other way that we can do this, so I'm going to turn my slider back up. So we're kind of back to where we started. I'm going to turn my labels off by clicking this label button. The other way that we can do this is by using some of our tools. So over here, again, on the left-hand side, we've got our legend, we've got our add data button, and then we have this tools button. So if we click the tools button, we get a series of options. And so one of the best ways to be able to look at two data sets at the same time is by using this swipe layer. And so if I click the swipe layer, what's going to happen is it's going to pick two data sets that I have already on my map here. So I only have two. So it's picking those heat index days and my households with seniors living alone. And here I'm able to switch between horizontal and vertical swipe. So I like the horizontal swipe here. So I'm able to swipe back and forth, right, between these two data layers and be able to see, I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. Again, where there are some of those areas that are considered that have a lot of seniors living alone, and then also where we see those high heat index days, right, which is pretty much the whole area here. So that is another way that you can start to look at data at two layers at one time. I will also mention, I'm going to go back to my legend here, and I'm going to turn off my high heat index days. We have an option to copy layers now, which is a new feature. So if I click this ... over here on my households with seniors living alone, you'll see that I can remove it if I want to get it off my map, or I can copy the layer. And so it's going to make an exact copy of the layer. It's going to add it to my map. But what I can do now is I can look at a past time period, right? So this is super helpful if you are trying to look at change over time. And again, that would be looking at two data sets at one time. We're looking at the current year of ACS data, and then we're going to go back and look at an older year of ACS data. I can do the same thing with my labels and my transparency, but I can also use this swipe layer, which I think is going to be probably most useful. So you can see as I swipe back and forth across the map, we can start to see where there were areas that didn't have a lot of seniors living alone. And now there are a lot more areas in the Oklahoma City region that we have seniors living alone, or we have more seniors living alone, right? So that tells us a little bit about maybe an increasing need, right? And again, if you're thinking about programming or writing a grant, it's a great way to say things have changed and we need to respond, right? There are more seniors living alone. We know that the climate, or that our temperatures are getting higher, and there's more need around that. So that just wanted to point that out too, where you can not only do it with two very different data sets, but you can do it with a data set that has some historical data and some more current data. All right, so I'm going to go back to my legend, and I don't want that old layer anymore. So I can do two things. I can either just turn it off and it'll still be in my legend, or like I mentioned, if I use this little ... here, I can remove that layer completely. So there we are with that. Okay, so there we have a couple of other options as well here. So I'm going to turn my heat index back on. One of the things that you'll notice too is, like I said, is that a new layer is always going to add or show up on top, right? We have this little set of arrows here, right, where I could drag and drop my households with seniors living alone on top of my high heat index days. And again, you're going to see the map change when I do that. That's often helpful when you're adding multiple layers. So I could go back, for example, I can clear my search and I could add in, let's see, what was I looking for? Shelters. So if I was interested in where folks could go during those high heat index days, I could start adding some of those assets on my map here. So for example, we've got some nonprofit organizations focused on housing and shelter. So I could add those to my map. Again, click my view legend button. And now I'm able to see a little bit more information, right? I'm able to see these show up on top. My possible cooling shelters or places that people could go during those high heat days. We can start to create some stories, right? We were looking at this eastern part of Oklahoma City, and we can see that there's not a lot of organizations there related to housing or shelter. And so that may be an area where there is really great need, right? For those seniors living alone or for folks that are more vulnerable that need access to places like cooling shelters. So again, it not only helps you know like how many, but it also helps you really target where maybe those needs are going to be most serious within an area. So that is another way to go about doing things. So now I want to explore some of the other tools with you. So first and foremost, I'm going to zoom in just a little bit here into kind of more of the city itself. And I want to point out one more thing that's here in the bottom right-hand corner. So there's this little square of squares down here, and I can click to open that. And what this is it's a series of base maps. So we default to this sort of gray base map that's pretty standard. However, we do have some other options. So we could add imagery. So if we wanted to see buildings or land, we could add imagery. We can add streets, terrain or topography. It kind of depends on what you're looking at. But in this instance, I think adding streets can be super helpful. I need to turn my transparency down on some of my layers to be able to see my base map a little bit better. But again, as we're thinking about where people could go to get help or to go to a cooling shelter, we can also think about transportation routes, right? Are there any major highways? Are there bus routes in this area? And having this street map as part of our base map can help us get a better idea of sort of what is the density, what are some of the possible transportation routes these folks could take, and just give us a little bit more in-depth view of the area that we're looking at. So that's one additional feature that we have. Over here, again, on the left-hand side within our tools, we've got quite a few other features. These were all available in our old map room, but we've improved them here, and so I'll demonstrate them for you. So first and foremost, we have a query data tool. So the query data tool is really asking questions of the data on your map. So if you want to know, for example, if there are census tracts where there's more than 30% of the people in a census tract living alone, seniors living alone, we can choose our layer. So we want to look at our seniors living alone layer. And now we're going to select a field to query. So we can look at that percent, right? The households of seniors living alone, percent of all households. That's going to be what we're asking. I want to know areas that have greater than, we'll say 25%. And I can run that query by clicking this Run Query button. So now what I get are some of these highlighted areas on my map. These are going to be the census tracts that meet my query criteria, right? These are census tracts. If I hover over them, I'll get more information and I'll be able to see that, in fact, there is a higher percentage than 25 of seniors living alone in this census tract. And specifically, it's 34%, which is pretty high. This one is around 35%. Some of these in the southern area, 29, and then this one, my Zoom is in the way, I can't see, is around 28 there. So the query tool can come in very handy, again, as you're trying to kind of whittle down or find focus of where are some of those areas where we see that there's a ton of seniors living alone. This one may not be as interesting, right? Because we do see that there's a couple of potential shelters nearby. This one, though, still here in the east, kind of northern part of Oklahoma City, it looks like they don't have a lot of services around them, and that could be a very good place to target some of those interventions. So that is one way to go about using that query tool. We also have a select data tool, and this is super useful for folks who are looking to just come and extract data from the map room. So to get back to that, I'm going to click this little back button on my tool list, and then I'm going to choose select data. And as I mentioned, this is going to be able to give me the ability to extract data from the map. So here it's telling me that my map layer that I'm going to be selecting is those exempt organizations. I could change it to the households or the heat index, but in this case, I want to keep it. And now I can either draw a rectangle, which is going to be a rectangle. I can draw a polygon, which means I can kind of make an irregular shape. I can do a lasso, which is sort of a circle, or I can do a radius. So if I wanted to see 10 miles around the Oklahoma City center, where would that be? So I'll go ahead and do that select by radius. Here it's 10 miles, just as I had said, and I am going to click on the map. So it tells me click a point on the map. And so I'm just going to click right here where it says Oklahoma City. I'm going to zoom out a little bit so we can see that this gives me now a 10-mile radius around the city. And I'm able to see then down here, it tells me to either view the data or export it as a CSV. So if I click view data, what's going to happen is that right-hand menu is going to open, and I'm able to look at the 34 different shelter organizations that fall within that 10-mile radius. So I can scroll through these to get information if I want to, but I can also export this then to a data file. So here I have a button at the top that says export to CSV, which is an Excel, or I can click this export to CSV down here in the menu on the left side menu, and it's going to download these data into an Excel. This can be very helpful if you're looking to do outreach or coordination. Maybe you want to talk to these shelters and see if they do provide cooling centers or not, so you can make an even better map, right, of the places that are open versus closed, those types of things. So that select data tool can come in very handy. It's also good if you just need to grab data, again, for like a grant application, or you're trying to, solve a problem or figure something out. A good way to explore the data on the map. So we've talked about the query data tool and the select data tool. We also have measurement tools as well. So if you want to look for geographic coordinates, so you want to know the coordinates of any place, you can do that very easily just by clicking the map. It'll give you the latitude, longitude. It'll tell you what the elevation is. So a lot of interesting information in there. You can measure paths. So if we're thinking about how far it would be for a person living in this eastern area to get, as the crow flies, right, to an emergency shelter, we can draw some paths. We could follow sidewalks on our base map if we were zoomed in. We can see here that the line that I've drawn is about 1.5 miles. There's a bit of an elevation, though, shift there, so that might be hard for people with limited mobility to get there if they were walking. So some interesting information there. Or we can measure an area. The measure area is pretty useful if you're looking at land or land property, that kind of thing. So all of those are available within the measurement tools. We also have the ability to draw graphics. So you can include a point, a circle, a rectangle, an arrow. I always like demonstrating the arrow because it's like, I want you to pay attention to this right here. So you can draw a nice big arrow. You can change the color if you'd like to. And this is nice too if you're trying to keep in line with like your brand standards. Maybe you want all of your graphics to be a certain color or a certain palette. You can do that very easily. And if you don't like the graphics that you've drawn, we do have an undo button, so you can undo it, or you can erase all of the graphics that you've added to your map. So all of these options are available here to you under that graphics, draw graphics options in the tool. We also have the mask tool available, and this is super helpful if you are trying to really call out a very specific part of an area. So what we're going to do here is we're going to pick the area that we want masked. So here, let's just say we're going to mask our county. I can now click on this area of Oklahoma City that I'm most interested in. And let me zoom out a little bit so you can see how this works. But what's going to happen is it's going to mask all of the areas around that one county that I've selected. This is nice because it really helps the reader or the viewer kind of focus in, right? And not get distracted by all of that other information on the map, right? And so you're able to really highlight that. And you can, again, turn the transparency of this up or down. If you turn it all the way to 100%, you're not going to see anything. If you turn it down a little bit, you'll get some of that information, but not quite as clearly as you're going to get it here in the middle where we've clicked. You can clear this selection by clicking clear all selections, or you can delete it using that little trash box there. So that's available to you as well. I already demonstrated the swipe layer for you, so I won't do that again. But we do then also have walk scores available. You can click anywhere on the map here and you can get a walk score. This area that I've selected is not very walkable. I bet if I click farther into the city, yeah, I'll get a better score. So that one's around 71, which means it's very walkable, lots of sidewalks. So those are the tools that are available in that tool list for you in this left-hand menu. In addition to the tools, we also have some updated export options. So in our old map room, we had sort of limited export options in terms of either a JPEG or a PDF. Now we do have the ability to export to PNGs and GIFs. And if you're an Adobe user, some of those other file types as well. So a lot more options than we used to have. We also have some advanced options that allow you to set the resolution. So if you are going to be printing these maps, or for some reason you need a high resolution map, you have the option to use these advanced features to set the resolution now. For the export, you can choose to get the map only, or you can get the map plus the legend. So it's really up to you how you want to look at it. And you will just go ahead and click that export button, and it will start to export your files, and you'll see that it's sort of loading down here. And when it's ready, it'll be just like that. I can click this little map only, and it's going to open as a PDF that I can then save or print or do whatever I need to do with it. So that's that export function. And as I said, it has definitely more features and that higher resolution than our old map room did. We also have the share function. So you can share this via email. You can share maps on social media, which I think are great conversation starters if you're trying to talk about either an issue or an opportunity in your community. Great way to start dialogue and get people sort of rooted in data. Or you can use this copy link, which is a short link, and it is dynamic. So if you were to share this out with folks, it would bring them back to the map room here, and they would be able to interact with the data on the map. They could change locations, they could add more data, and it wouldn't affect your original map, but it is a great engagement tool, right? To get people thinking, again, to root them in data as they're thinking about new ways of doing things, right? Or exploring problems. And so that share link is going to be super useful if you are also sharing maybe with colleagues as you're doing work or writing for something. All of that's available to you there. So those are most of the features and functions of the map room. A couple of things to note. This little button down here and the huggy heart at the very top are going to take you back to a smaller screen, right? So this is taking up my full screen, which is nice because I'm really able to kind of dive in, right, to the map room. But maybe you want to get back to the home page, right? And so you can do that by clicking that little huggy heart there at the top, or or as I mentioned, the little squares right here at the bottom. So both of those things are available to you there. Other than that, I think that was all of the highlights. Let me make sure I got all my notes here. For Yes. Okay. So I think I hit everything, and I'm happy to take questions. We've got about 15 minutes here left at the end to answer any questions or to demonstrate any additional features that you guys might want to see.
Hi, everyone. We are again in webinar mode, so just raise your hand or post into the Q&A or chat. Okay, let me recognize you, Chris. If I can get there, sorry. Trying, Chris. Okay, you may now talk, Chris, please.
Great, thanks so much. Just a quick question here. I think I may have just gotten a text answer there in the Q&A, but I just noticed on some of the layers, the base layer included here just for the NCAP agency boundaries.
Yes.
The CSV file that gets exported there doesn't appear to contain any of the attribute data about what counties the agencies actually serve. It just gives us a nice list of the counties. So is there any way to get some more of the geodata files associated with this, or will there be more of like a, I guess, bibliography or citation in each of the data sources to go and pull like the raw data files, or
Yeah, so the NCAP agency boundary is kind of a special layer that we worked with NCAP on to get those boundaries. And so we can go back and look at the original file and see what other information we can include in that export. But basically, any other data layer that you add to the map, you will be able to get, for example, kind of all of the attributes that are available. And you can get back to the original source at any time. So you'll be able to click that I button next to the data name and get back to the original source if you're looking for those original files. So but we'll look into the additional information for those agency boundaries. So that might have just been they might not just be turned on for that export.
I guess that's the only layer that would have a like custom geography then, because everything else sounded like the pretty standard tiger line shaped file, like tract, block, county, municipality.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Correct.
Great. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Thank you.
And Chris, this is Jordan. Hi. Sorry, I'm not visible. In that chat, I did include my email address. So if you do want some more info on those NCAP boundaries, do feel free to reach out.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And actually, while I'm chatting really quickly, Jamie, I know some folks in the Q&A had some questions about margin of error data. And it would be great if you could kind of speak more to how we are taking those into consideration and presenting those to folks.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of things to note about margin of error. So anytime we can, we will publish the margins of error. So you can see for a lot of our data sets here, when you click the map, you can get that information. We can see the percent of population, margin of error, total population and poverty, margin of error. So those are produced when available and included in these pop-ups. They would also be included then in the exports as well. So that's a way to get that information. A couple of notes about margin of error are that basically, if you're working in a very populated city, most of the time, if you're working at a county or a census tract level, the margins of error are going to be smaller because we have more people to survey. But when you get into rural areas and you're looking at small rural areas, the margins of error do come into play because oftentimes they are high, right? All data are estimates, right? All these data that we're working with are estimates. estimates, and some are better than others, right? And so that is sort of just what we have to work with, though. And so it is something important to know whether your margin of error is high or low. And it is, I always encourage people to disclose it, right? We're using these data. We know they are estimates. They're guiding our decisions, but not forcing our decisions, right? And just noting that, right? Whether they're high or low or where they're at. And again, if we could make the margins of error smaller in rural areas, man, we sure would. But we haven't quite figured out, the census hasn't even quite figured out how to do that better. So those are just some caveats when working with margins of error. We have been talking at CARES too a lot about how we can show margins of error in the community needs assessment as well. So that's a conversation that we're having and trying to figure out how to not overwhelm people, but also provide that information in an informative and meaningful way. So just know that we're working on that as well. Other questions here? Oh, those are just chats, I guess. Well, I just want to encourage you guys, if you do have questions or you need any assistance with the new map room, you can reach out to our team at any time. We have contact information here at the bottom of the hub, and this help address goes to me and Jordan and other people on our team. So if we can't answer your question, we have data and research analysts that probably can. Or if it's a question like Chris's, where it's like, we're missing some data in an export, we're always happy to address those issues as well. So feel free to reach out to us. And then just another note, as I said, the old map room is going to be sunsetting towards the end of June, the beginning of July. So if you want to use that old map room, you've got a couple weeks left to do it. Otherwise, we are going to be transitioning over to our new map room. And if you do have any thoughts or questions or feedback for us on the new map room, again, feel free to reach out to us. We are very much excited about the new interface and the new features, but we also know that there's always room for improvement. So if you do have thoughts or feedback for us, we are happy to take that as well.
Jamie, since we have a couple of minutes, could you go to the page just for the folks who may be new and have not seen the Data Hub before, that shows how they create a community assessment report? Exactly. Yeah, the find data.
Yeah, sure.
I know our focus was on the new map room today, but I think that there are some folks who have not seen the hub before.
Yeah, for sure. So if you haven't seen the hub before, you haven't visited, the first thing that you're going to want to do is register for an account. The map room you can access without logging in, but you do need to be able to log in to access the community needs assessment. So just a little note there. But yeah, as Terry said, under Find Data, we have a couple of assessments. This is the community needs assessment here. And so you'll see that the first step of making an assessment is selecting your location. You can select from a series of counties. So you could select one or more counties depending on whether you are working within your region, or maybe you're working with just a couple counties within your region. So that's flexible there. We also have some municipalities for the state of Massachusetts and some Cook County suburbs for the people in Cook County. Not all geographies are standard everywhere. So that's why we've had to make some exceptions here. But if you are working at the county level, you can select some counties, and then you can select the data that you want to include in your community needs assessment. And so here, this is a very big list of data. We do have an easy button at the top where you can select all indicators, but you can also go in and just select individual indicators as well. So just that's a note there. Just like in the map room too, we have like these little eye buttons that'll give you more information. It'll tell you some of the attributes. It'll give you a nice little map, show you supplemental data and a link back to the original source. And you'll see here that these are nested right under kind of top level categories like income, employment, education, housing, right? All of the important ones there. And so I can select all indicators and go to my report. And what's going to happen now is all of the indicators that I selected, it's going to produce data for the counties that I've selected here. So you can see that menu sort of populating all of the data that's going to be included in my needs assessment. Each of the indicators are going to follow a similar flow. You'll see the report location, which is going to be the aggregate of the 3 counties that I selected. Then I get information for each of the counties that I selected. And then we're going to benchmark that to the state and national averages. So you'll see here for California and the rest of the United States. Under each of the data tables, there is a link back to the original source, or you can get more details. When and where available, we'll also include an interactive map. And then also when and where available, we will include breakout information. And so breakout information is most likely going to include things like age, race, ethnicity, and gender. And these are very helpful, again, if you're trying to really kind of target certain populations. If you're looking for vulnerabilities within gender or within race, this is where you're going to be able to see some of those. So you'll be able to see, right, this is not a very exciting indicator here, but total population, but you can see how it's broken out. And then we do have some data that are also available as change over time. So here we can look at, for example, our educational attainment. This is something where we do have data for many years or change over time, and it'll give you a nice little graph, right, of change over time on that kind of stuff as well. And the other thing that is often included when we can make a value statement, so like you're doing better than or worse than those state and national averages, we'll include a dial as well to kind of show you where you are at in benchmark compared to those state and national averages. All of these reports are downloadable, and so you can download these either as a PDF, which is going to be this static document, right, that shows you just what's on the screen. You can also get all of these data in an Excel file, much like you can with that select data tool in the map room. And then we have this Microsoft Word option, which I love to tell the story that like many years ago, born out of community action requests was the Microsoft Word option, because we were providing you guys with all of these data in a PDF, and you said, that's great, but this is just one part of our community needs assessment. We've got interviews and surveys and all of this other stuff. And we can't put it all together very easily, right? So we made the Microsoft Word export, so you can then do some modification. You can kind of take pieces that you want and delete pieces that you don't want. You can add additional context or include additional data or images. So that Microsoft Word option is a really nice feature there. So that was like a very fast community needs assessment overview, but you can find that under the find data. And then we also have a housing assessment that's available too, that just looks at those housing layers, some very specific housing layers. And then in addition to like what the new data in the map room, you can also come to what's new here, and you'll be able to see all of the data that we're updating, and things that are new and available to you. So we also have support materials available. So if you need help with the assessment or with the map room, there are how-tos, kind of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps to make a map or to make an assessment.
All right, awesome. Thank you. As you know, Jamie, I'm a huge, huge fan of the Data Hub, and I always appreciate when you guys are available to share this information with our network. I want to just take just a moment to share a couple of things. Let me get back to my share screen. If I can find it, there we go. All right. I want to ask you guys, as always, to please complete your evaluation. Here is a QR code and a handy dandy link as well, which are also in the chat. It's a very brief evaluation, but it does help NCAP to understand whether we're, hitting the right mark as far as the information that you need. So take a minute to do that. And I also want to share that the recording of this webinar will be available in the next day or two, as are recordings of all of our webinars at our resource page. So here's a QR code and a link to that. It's also in your chat. And one last thing, if you will bear with me, registration will close for this event. So if you're an executive director and you and your board chair would like to take advantage of a unique 2-day opportunity to get away and just have some mind melding opportunities, some networking opportunities with your peers, we'll be in St. Paul, Minnesota, June 26th and 27th, and registration does close at midnight, 11:59 p.m. actually, this Friday. So there's a QR code on your screen, or you can go to the events tab at communityactionpartnership.com for additional information and look for 2024 Annual Executive Director and Board Chair Symposium for additional information. So with that, I will thank our partners at Missouri Cares. You guys are always so awesome and so responsive. So we appreciate your time. We appreciate your talent. We appreciate your dedication to the Community Action Network and to making this wonderful tool available to all of our members. So with that, I will say thank you and see y'all next time.